Imagine this for a moment. Someone who is completely blind, totally unable to see,
Okay.
but they insist, absolutely insist, they can see perfectly. They might describe paintings on a wall that isn't there,
Yeah.
or chat with people who haven't visited.
Right, and then if they bump into something, say a table.
Yeah, they don't say, oops,
Yeah.
didn't see that. They might say, oh, I was just admiring the lovely wood grain.
Yeah.
It sounds incredible, but this is Anton Babinski syndrome.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, Anton Babinski syndrome. You might also hear it called Anton syndrome, or maybe more descriptively, visual anosognosia.
Anosognosia, meaning lack of awareness of a deficit.
Precisely. So the core of it is this really striking combination.
Yeah.
You have cortical blindness, that's blindness caused by brain damage, not a problem with the eyes themselves,
There we go.
combined with this complete, unwavering denial that they are blind.
And that denial, that lack of awareness is what's so, well, unsettling. It just seems impossible. You have someone who objectively can't see a thing, they fail all the eye tests, but subjectively, in their own mind, they are seeing. And not just seeing, but often inventing these, quite vivid details about what they supposedly see.
That's the crux of it. This profound lack of awareness about their own blindness, coupled with these confident confabulations about their visual world, it really makes you question how our brain builds our reality.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit. Cortical blindness. How exactly does damage in the brain cause blindness if the eyes are, working fine?
Think of it like this. Your eyes are cameras. They capture the light, the images, right?
Sure.
But that raw data needs to be processed, sent to the, let's say, the editing suite in your brain. That's mainly the visual cortex in the occipital lobes at the back of your head.
Got it. Back of the head.
So with cortical blindness, the cameras, the eyes might be sending perfectly good signals, but the editing suite, the visual cortex, is damaged. It can't receive or interpret those signals properly.
Ah, so the information arrives, maybe,
Yeah.
but the brain just can't make sense of it, can't turn it into sight.
Exactly. The result is blindness, even with healthy eyes.
And then, on top of not being able to see, the person doesn't even realize it. This anosognosia, this denial, that seems to be the absolute key feature of Anton Babinski.
It is. Anosognosia isn't specific just to vision loss. It can happen with other neurological issues too, like paralysis. But here it's specifically about the blindness. And it's crucial to understand this isn't like psychological denial, like refusing to accept bad news.
Yep.
It's neurological. The brain itself seems unable to recognize or register the loss of function.
Which then leads to these confabulations, these invented visual stories. Can you give us some more concrete examples? It's hard to picture.
Sure. Imagine asking someone with ABS what color tie you're wearing. They might confidently say, oh, it's a lovely blue paisley, when actually you're wearing a plain red one, or maybe no tie at all.
Wow.
Or they might describe, the furniture arrangement in a room, pointing out chairs and tables when the room is actually completely empty. They might try to walk straight through a closed door, genuinely believing they see an open path.
So they act on these false perceptions.
Absolutely. There's a well-known description that says, these patients behave and talk as if they have normal vision. And they might describe people or objects around them that simply aren't there. I remember reading about a case, a patient who just kept insisting she could see perfectly, even after failing literally every single visual test they gave her.
It's just mind-bending. So what's happening inside the brain, neurologically speaking, to cause both the blindness and this astonishing lack of awareness?
Well, the root cause is almost always damage to both occipital lobes. Remember, those are the main visual processing centers.
Both sides have to be affected.
Generally, yes. Significant damage to both. And this damage often comes from a stroke, specifically one that affects the posterior cerebral arteries. These arteries are the main blood supply to the occipital lobes.
Okay, so lack of blood flow, stroke damage. Are there other causes too?
Yes, definitely. Things like severe head trauma, certain brain infections, or even a condition called PRES, posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, which involves brain swelling, particularly at the back, can also sometimes trigger Anton Babinski syndrome.
So the visual centers are damaged, but why the denial? Why doesn't the rest of the brain sort of notice that the vision department is offline? What are the theories there?
Good question. There are a couple of main ideas floating around. One popular one is the disconnection syndrome theory.
Disconnection.
Yeah, the idea is that even if some signals are getting processed, or maybe just because the visual cortex is damaged, the lines of communication are cut between those visual areas and other important parts of the brain, specifically the parts involved in self-awareness, insight, knowing about our own abilities. These are often linked to the parietal and frontal lobes.
So the part of the brain that knows things isn't getting the message that vision is gone, like a memo getting lost in the mail.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. The information about the visual deficit simply doesn't reach the brain regions that construct our sense of self and monitor our abilities. The system is unaware because it's disconnected from the relevant input.
Okay, that makes a certain kind of sense. A communication breakdown. You said there was another idea too.
Yes, another theory focuses on a kind of faulty internal monitoring system. The brain is constantly doing checks on itself, monitoring sensory input, motor output.
Right.
The idea here is that the internal visual monitor itself is damaged. So instead of correctly reporting no visual input, it sends out a false positive signal, like, yep, vision is active, all systems go.
Yeah.
Even when nothing is coming in from the eyes or being processed correctly.
Huh. So it's getting fake feedback from its own monitoring system.
Potentially, yes. This false signal could create the illusion of seeing and lead directly to the denial of blindness, because as far as that monitoring system is concerned, vision is happening.
Which brings us back to the confabulations, the brain making things up. You stress this isn't lying. So what's driving it? Why invent details about blue ties and non-existent furniture?
Exactly. It's crucial to separate this from deliberate deception. Confabulation seems to be the brain's attempt to, make sense of the situation, to fill in the blanks.
Filling gaps.
Yes. Think about it. The language centers, the parts involved in reasoning and storytelling, they're often still working perfectly fine, but they're not getting any accurate visual information. And critically, because of the anosognosia, they don't know they're not getting visual information.
Oh.
So when asked, what do you see? The brain scrambles to provide an answer. It might pull from old memories, general knowledge about what should be in a room, maybe even random neural noise, and weaves it into a plausible sounding but totally fabricated visual description.
It's like the brain's narrative function just keeps running, even with faulty data. It needs a story.
Precisely. It needs coherence. Gabriel Anton himself, one of the physicians the syndrome is named after, suggested something along these lines way back. He thought the speech areas, disconnected from the damaged visual pathways, just confabulated responses because they lacked real visual input to report on. The brain hates a vacuum, you could say.
It seems determined to present a complete picture, even if it has to paint it itself.
That's a great way to put it.
This whole phenomenon, Anton Babinski, it must teach us some really fundamental things about how the brain works, right? Beyond just vision.
Oh, absolutely. It has some profound implications. For one, it clearly shows that our awareness of our own abilities, even something as basic as whether we can see or not, isn't just automatic, it's an active brain process.
It requires specific brain regions and connections to be working properly.
Exactly. It relies on complex interactions and communication within the brain. Our sense of self and our assessment of our own functions is something the brain actively constructs and maintains.
And it highlights that the brain can be, you said earlier, sort of blind to its own blindness.
Yes. It demonstrates that the brain can have major deficits without having any awareness of those deficits. That's a staggering idea when you think about it. And it applies beyond vision to memory, movement, other senses too.
And the confabulation part, it really speaks to the brain's drive to create a consistent story, doesn't it?
It really does. It highlights this incredibly powerful drive for coherence. The brain wants our experience to make sense, to be a continuous, logical narrative. Faced with a massive gap like the total absence of vision, it doesn't just tolerate the void.
It fills it.
It actively constructs something to fill that void, to maintain that sense of a coherent reality, even if the construction is completely false. It prioritizes narrative consistency in a way.
Which really throws a wrench into how we think about our own perception, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if the brain can so convincingly invent a whole visual world for someone who is totally blind, what does that suggest about the reality the rest of us perceive every day?
That is the big, slightly unsettling question, isn't it? Anton Babinski forces us to confront the idea that what we experience as reality isn't just a passive reflection of the outside world.
It's more of an interpretation. a construction.
It suggests it's very much an active construction and an interpretation created by our brain based on sensory input, yes, but also on expectations, memory, and these internal monitoring processes. And as ABS shows, these processes can sometimes go dramatically wrong. Our sense of what's real and our awareness of our own abilities are more fragile and more actively generated by the brain than we usually assume.
So wrapping this up then, the core paradox of Anton Babinski syndrome is this stark contrast. Complete blindness coupled with this utter certainty of being able to see, driven by a brain that's not just damaged in its visual centers, but is also unaware of that damage, and actively compensates by creating a substitute fabricated visual world.
That captures it perfectly. It's a startling window into the brain's complexity, its limitations, and its remarkable, sometimes flawed attempts to make sense of everything, even itself.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? If the brain's construction of reality can be that divorced from external input in cases like ABS, well, how much of anyone's everyday perceived reality is also a kind of construction, a best guess based on the brain's interpretation? It certainly makes you appreciate the mysteries still locked inside our own heads about awareness and reality itself.